Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro Moros called for a boost to cooperation with Nicaragua. Palestinians protested the arrest of 5 students and wounding of one of them by Israeli occupation forces at the Beirut University in the West Bank. At the start of the 2-day summit in the Malawian capital, the Southern African Development Community noted progress in tackling the insurgency in northern Mozambique. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. Venezuela's President Nicolás Maduro Moros ratified the ties of friendship and cooperation that exist with the government and people of Nicaragua. Following his visit to Nicaragua on Monday to attend the inauguration of President Daniel Ortega for a 4th consecutive term, President Maduro announced this Tuesday that the high-level joint commission between the two countries will launch working sessions in the coming days to advance a new roadmap of cooperation in a wide range of areas. President Maduro also extended his congratulations to the Nicaraguan people on the inauguration of President Daniel Ortega and Vice President Rosario Murillo.
President Daniel Ortega and I have decided to revive and reactivate the high-level joint commission that governs cooperation between Nicaragua and Venezuela. And in the coming weeks, there will be a series of working sessions between the high-level commission, the Nicaraguan side, and the Venezuelan side. And we will draw up a new roadmap for economic, agricultural, energy, cultural, social, and political cooperation. A new map for the years to come, starting with the beginning of President Daniel Ortega's new constitutional term.
Chilean President-elect Gabriel Boric called on Congress to expedite the approval of a pardon bill for the political prisoners detained in the major anti-government protests of 2019. Boric stated that the best possible agreement is being pursued and noted that just 2 votes are required from the right-wing senators in order to secure its approval. The president-elect stressed that his government is committed to establishing a broad dialogue with all sectors in order to find common grounds and avoid tensions. Boric emphatically called on senators to resolve the issue of the ongoing detention of the mainly young prisoners during the month of January, stressing it cannot wait any longer. Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel denounced the human rights violations committed at the Guantanamo prison on the 20th anniversary of its establishment on the Cuban territory illegally occupied by the United States. The Cuban head of state condemned the constant violations and abuses committed at the military base that Washington maintains on the eastern part of the island, despite frequent demands for the return of the territory. 2 decades after the first detainees arrived at Guantanamo Bay, a group of United Nations experts urged the U.S. to finally close the site that has seen unrelenting human rights violations, which they say is a stain on Washington's stated commitment to the rule of law. The experts also call on the U.S. government to return detainees home or to save third countries and to provide remedy or reparation for their torture and arbitrary detention. Now we address other topics. In Mexico, the increase in COVID-19 cases is affecting the airline industry, forcing the cancellation of flights. Our correspondent, Eduardo Martinez, brings us more details.
Hundreds of passengers were stranded at Mexico City International Airport due to flight cancellations, following an increase in COVID-19 infections among airline staff.
We are asking if there is another flight that they can change us to, but we have to come here to line up for another 3 or 4 hours to be told that there is nothing, and we will have to see when.
Most complaints are related to the lack of advance notice for passengers. Many have to spend more money on changing travel arrangements, expenses they hadn't planned on.
Delays, hotel payments, meals, setbacks, stress because we don't know what is happening with the flight, and we don't get an answer.
Between January 5th and 10th, Aeromexico canceled more than 280 flights. The Union Association of Aviation Pilots reported that 209 workers had tested positive for SARS-CoV-2, including 79 pilots and 130 flight attendants. In addition to the cancellations, there have been delays caused by having to submit a negative test.
The airline asked for it, and the 3 vaccinations are already administered. That's why we are waiting for before we can board the plane.
In his morning conference, President Andrés Manuel López Obrador announced that a screening test for the coronavirus will be conducted due to the presence of some symptoms, and explained the pandemic situation facing the country.
Yes, there are increasing infections, but fortunately this is not yet reflected in hospitalizations and, more importantly, in death.
To date, the country has reported 4.1 million confirmed cases of COVID-19 and more than 300,000 deaths associated with the virus. The authorities have prioritized vaccination as a mechanism for dealing with the outbreak. Adults of 60 years of age have already received a booster, as have a large number of health workers. Young people between 15 and 17 years of age are receiving a second dose, and in the coming days, those between 30 and 59 years of age will be called for a third dose.
Eduardo Martínez, TeleSUR, Ciudad de México.
Thank you, Eduardo, for this report, and now we continue. The Bolivian government has allocated more than $4 billion for the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic this year. Deputy Health Minister Álvaro Terrazas detailed that the figure includes $17 million recently incorporated into the fight against COVID-19 during the first quarter of this year in response to the advance of the fourth wave by order of President Luis Arce Catacora. He also said that the money earmarked to tackle the COVID-19 is part of the overall budget of over $32 billion for the health sector this year. The Deputy Minister also informed that more than half of the country's municipalities have not used even 60% of allocated resources. The spread of the Omicron variant is pushing COVID-19 towards being an endemic disease that humanity can live with, although it remains a pandemic for now, according to the European Union's drug watchdog. The European Medicines Agency also expressed doubts about giving a fourth vaccine shot to the general population, saying repeated boosters were not a sustainable strategy. The World Health Organization has also warned that repeated COVID boosters are not a viable strategy and stressed that vaccine equity is key to bringing the pandemic to an end. The EU agency advised that countries should instead start thinking about spacing out boosters at longer intervals and synchronizing them with the start of the cold season in the way that flu vaccines are currently administered. The agency also said that studies had confirmed that despite being more infectious, the risk of hospitalization from the Omicron variant was between 1/3 and 1/2 of that posed by the Delta strain.
Of course, we don't know, nobody knows exactly when we'll be at the end of the tunnel, but we will be there. And what is important and what we are seeing is that we are moving towards indeed the virus becoming more endemic. But I think we cannot say that we have already reached that status. So the virus is still behaving as a pandemic virus, and the Omicron emergence is clearly showing that. I've not been saying that this is necessarily a good thing, because actually we're extremely concerned about the burden of disease that will be carried by the huge amount of cases that will be occurring now in the European Union with Omicron. And as said, even if severity might be lower, unfortunately, many individuals will get hospitalized. So we have to be prepared of the consequences of such a wave. At the same
And we'll be right back after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back. Palestinians protesting the arrest of 5 students and wounding of one of them by Israeli occupation forces at the Bizreit University in the West Bank were met with repression on Tuesday. The illegal Israeli occupation forces made the arrests on Monday during a raid in the university, during which they also confiscated models from the Faculty of Science. According to investigations conducted by the Palestinian Center for Human Rights, an Israeli special unit operated under cover and dress as Palestinians sneaked into Birzeit, northern Ramallah, in a white bus. The unit stationed near the western gate of the university and stopped 5 students as they stepped out of their car at the gates. The students tried to run towards the university, but the Israeli unit chased them and opened fire at them, wounded one of them.
The demonstration today came after the Israeli occupation forces arrested 5 representatives of student blocs at Birzeit University. In this demonstration, we send our message to a number of parties. Firstly, to the Israeli occupation. We clash and fight daily, so Israel has to increase its strength, because we will not back down or be subdued.
According to the Palestinian Prisoner Society, a local NGO advocating for prisoners' rights, there are currently more than 4,000 Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails, including at least 606 inmates. Most are in prison following trials in Israeli military courts, which do not meet the minimum requirements of fairness as required by international law, or the legal norms practiced in even nominally democratic countries. In addition, there are some 500 Palestinians being held without trial or due process in an internationally condemned practice known as in Israel as administrative detention. The struggle for freedom by Palestine's political prisoners, including the use of hunger strikes, is a cause that unites Palestinians from different factions. Russia's ambassador to the United Kingdom on Tuesday reiterated that Moscow has no intention of invading Ukraine and stressed that NATO's expansion closer to Russia's borders created this risk of a large-scale war.
The security arrangement for Europe now. This is not true. NATO is one factor of security. The other factor of security, this is Russia. And for a long time, we have had a balance on the European situation. But then NATO has started to aggressively expand to the east. Enlargement is a dangerous thing that has been accompanied by many offensive actions. We find that NATO is conducting aggressive behavior. This is serious. It is coming closer and closer to our borders. So now it is it has promised to accept Ukraine as a member. And we see that there is a closer cooperation between NATO and Ukraine. We are seeing many ships coming into the Black Sea, exercising over there aggressively as well. We see a lot of aircrafts, military aircrafts.
On Tuesday, Kazakhstan President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev announced the withdrawal of the peacekeeping troops of the Collective Security Treaty Organization, giving the restoration of order in the country. The military contingent arrived in the Central Asian nation last week following a request from the Kazakh president in the face of violent destabilization attempts and framed back acts of terrorism. Also, Tokayev said the troops will withdraw within the next 10 days. The president explained that the acute phase of the counter-terrorist operation had been completed and the situation in all regions is stable, thus declaring the main mission of the CSTO peacekeeping forces to have been successfully completed.
The rapid deployment of CSTO peacekeepers and the performance of tasks to protect important facilities allowed the law enforcement of the Republic of Kazakhstan to stabilize the situation in the country. After the CSTO peacekeeping forces in cooperation with the Kazakh side complete their task, the return of peacekeeping units with equipment to their permanent deployment sites will be organized. The rapid deployment of CSTO peacekeepers and the
We repeat, at the invitation of Chinese State Councilor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi, the Turkish and Iranian foreign ministers will pay visits to China on January 12th and 14th respectively and announced this Tuesday.
State Councilor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi will hold talks with Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu and have in-depth exchanges of views on bilateral relations and international and regional issues of common concern. In recent years, China and Turkey have maintained high-level exchanges and communication at all levels and achieved fruitful results in practical cooperations in various fields. State Councilor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi will hold talks with Iranian Foreign Minister Hossein Amir Abdullahian. China and Iran enjoy profound traditional friendship. Under the leadership of the two heads of state, China-Iran relations have achieved remarkable development in recent years. The two sides have firmly supported each other on issues concerning each other's core interests, steadily promoted practical cooperation in various fields, and maintained close communication and coordination in international and regional affairs.
Chinese and Russian authorities have expressed their intention to deepen the strategic cooperation between their two nations this year. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi and his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov held a telephone conversation in which they called for cooperation and also joint efforts to protect the legitimate rights and interests of both sides and maintain regional peace and stability. The top diplomats stressed that Beijing and Moscow should deepen coordination and cooperation to counteract the presence of external forces meddling in the internal affairs of Central Asian countries, highlighting the recent events in Kazakhstan. They expressed their commitment to preventing so-called color revolutions in the region and Western attempts to spread chaos. And we have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa said Tuesday there had been significant progress in tackling an insurgency in northern Mozambique after a multinational force was deployed there last year. Ramaphosa, who chairs the Defense and Security section of the Southern African Development Community, provided an update on the situation at a two-day summit in the Malawian capital called to assess developments in the region. Members of the bloc and Rwanda stepped in 6 months ago to assist the Mozambican army, bringing in more than 3,000 troops. The gas-rich province of Cabo Delgado, which borders Tanzania, has been gripped by attacks by Islamic State-linked militants since 2017. At least 3,500 people have been killed and around 820,000 have fled their homes.
Since the deployment of SAMIM in Mozambique, significant progress has been made. The security situation in Cabo Delgado is improving, which has allowed for some internally displaced people to return to their homes and resume their normal lives. Whilst we note the gains of this mission, there have also been some challenges. We are saddened by the casualties suffered by SAMIM and the Mozambican Defense Force. I wish to extend our deepest condolences to the governments of Botswana, Lesotho, Mozambique, the United Republic of Tanzania, and my own country, South Africa.
Mali's military leader Assimi Goïta stated that he remains open to dialogue with the Economic Community of West African States after the bloc imposed sanctions on Bamako over delayed elections. In a sharp escalation after months of simmering diplomatic tensions, leaders from the bloc on Sunday agreed to close borders with each Sahel state and impose a trade embargo. The West African bloc also agreed to cut financial aid, freeze Mali's assets at the West Central Bank of West African states, and to recall their ambassadors from the country. The coordinated action followed a proposal by Mali's military government last month to stay in power for up to 5 years before staging elections, despite international demands that it respect the promise to hold elections in February. Meanwhile, a spokesperson for Guinea's ruling junta announced that the West African country was keeping its borders open with neighboring Mali, despite the announcement by the Economic Community of West African States that it will impose sanctions and border closures. Guinea was suspended from the bloc after soldiers seized power on September 5th last year, and ECOWAS has also imposed sanctions on the country while reiterating its demands for the unconditional release of President Alpha Condé, who has been under house arrest since ouster and the appointment of a civilian prime minister, as well as the information of transitional government. And the man accused of setting a fire that destroyed parts of South Africa's historic parliament complex faced a new charge of terrorism. Sandile Mafe, age 49, appeared on Tuesday in the courtroom in Cape Town for a bail hearing when the new charge was added. Mafe was charged with housebreaking with intent to steal, theft, 2 counts on arson, and possession of an explosive device when he appeared in court for the first time last week. The parliament complex was ravaged by the major blaze, which started on January 2nd and took firefighters 4 days to completely extinguish. The 130-year-old complex has been the site of the national legislature since the time of British colonialism in the late 18th century.
To our surprise, only this morning, as you heard the council submitting in court, only this morning they added some other charges. And only this morning they revealed it for the very first time that my client was assessed, and there is a documentation to that regard. He will have to be referred for mental observation. We heard the court saying that as well we are at liberty to refer our client to an independent psychiatrist.
And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.